I go to get out of the truck. I'm wobbly as hell. I can't hardly walk. And I make it just inside the door. And right as I went to take a step, and I just fall. And these nurses come out. They get a wheelchair or whatever. And I just remember, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm like half out of my head. But I just remember looking at my dad and saying, like, I'm going to die.
Welcome to Creepalachia. Today we have a really important story about an experience a close friend of mine had a few years ago now. But I'd like to introduce John Neese. Thank you for coming to the podcast, sir.
Absolutely.
So I guess go ahead. We start out by giving people a little backstory about you. Tell me about you and what your daily life is like and what you do for a living, where you live, all that good stuff.
Lived pretty much the same place my whole life. Bluefield, should I say Bluefield? Whatever.
I mean, yeah, sure.
Whatever. That's where I live. So anyway, lived there, grew up there my whole life. Ended up getting a job on the railroad after a multitude of jobs before that. It's crazy to think, like, now I used to have a running list because I kept so many part-time jobs at a single time. And now I'm like, I have to really go back and think about it. But now I've had the same job on the railroad for like 17 years. Maintaining signals.
Yeah.
Working on a signal construction gang years ago. But yeah, man. I mean, it's when you start talking about like this giant chunk of your life, and you're thinking like, I've worked for this place longer than I was in school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really makes you feel old.
It's a very important position too. And I know like you're on call, like I would compare it to a brain surgeon. I don't know, but you at any moment.
It feels like that sometimes. I don't have, I take them because, I like to pay bills. I don't like to pay bills, but I don't like to worry about having to pay bills. So I take a lot of calls and spend, nights out in God's country. And, most of the time it's pretty uneventful. Sometimes it's pretty stressful, but yeah, man, just being out at night is never, you never know what you're going to come across. It sounds stupid, but things look so much different at night, and you think a place perfect, and then you're in it in the dark and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't find any of this stuff I need to find. And yeah, so I try to like mark stuff with like night glow paint so I can find it.
Yeah, and we're talking like rural Appalachia, so I'm sure there are some precarious situations that you get into sometimes, like on those curvy roads at night.
Oh yeah, deer, they don't cross at the deer crossings, never. You get I hate to say this. It's not me talking bad. It just is what it is. The most dangerous thing I run into, like coal trucks aren't particularly dangerous because they're just going slow. They're just trying to get where they're going. And I get that. The thing that is dangerous, God help me, man, coal miners who are trying to get to work and are late to work have almost caused me so many accidents.
This is good to know.
At night, man, at night when I come out, I'll put my strobe light on, and my brights and my running lights, all that stuff, just so you see this truck, because my truck it's huge. It's huge, and it's really heavy. It's got high rail wheels and all that on it, and if my truck is so heavy that if it hits you, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
But like if you're in like I don't even know what I keep wanting to say like a Chevette, but that's not a vehicle anymore. Like what's the new thing? Like what's the tiny vehicle?
Let's see. There's a Mitsubishi something. I can't, it's not a Mirage. I can't remember. There's a real small
if you're in
car.
like a Honda Fit.
Yeah, there we go.
My vehicle's going to run right through that thing.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, I'll get them and they'll tail light me, and I'll flash them with, I've got these bright lights that I can run on my back end if I have to back up, and I'll flash them just to be like, hey, please get off. they'll speed around me and then they'll get in front of me and they keep brake checking me. And, you know, it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah. And your family's real good family friends with us. We've been friends for several years. And,
dude,
you know,
20 years.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's insane. And, and just to explain to people, you know, you don't have to get into specifics, but you're a father and you have a couple awesome children.
Yep. They're pretty good. They're the best. I mean, I don't know. You get somebody talking about their kids and they'll start crying, you know, but, they're great kids. John's super funny. Ava's just hit her teenage years and, you know,
yep.
But super sweet kids.
Flying by. And, that gets into the story too, which it's more than a story. I mean, it's a important experience, but also devastating one in a lot of ways that I appreciate you getting ready to share with us, because you don't really talk about this. We don't really bring it up, but I think, you know, people need to hear it so they can try to have a bit more understanding on what someone goes through during this. But how do you want to lay it out? Like, okay, it's 2020 and March and a pandemic happens. I'll let you take it from there, kind of lay it out what occurred that year.
So I guess, honestly, I'd probably have to go back to January of that year. The kids got sick with something. Okay. This was before there was even like talk of this at all. The kids get sick with something and they are laying around. They're, you know, coughing, snotting, all the nasty stuff. And they kind of have like a blue shade to them. So we rush them to the doctor, and the doctors are like, you know, it's something viral going around. We don't know what it is. It seems to take about a week to wear off, you know. And for like a whole week, you know, the kids are just coughing their heads off. They're laying around, you know, we're giving them over the counter stuff, whatever. They gave us like some antiviral type stuff to give to them. We're giving them medicine, whatever. They get better. They're fine. So then March, I guess it was March, April, something like that. It was when they really start talking about, well, at first I think they were just calling it coronavirus. And, you know, everybody's like making jokes about it. It's got kind of a funny name, you know, whatever. And it just goes on and on. And every time they talk about it on the news, it's West Virginia's doing great. You know, West Virginia is like the standard at the time, you know. And we just thought, this is no big deal. This isn't going to touch us. For some reason, it's not making it here. So, you know, we went on about our lives and, you know, whatever. That was before they ever talked about like masking up or anything like that. And it just wasn't real. It just was not a real thing to us, which sounds really selfish. Like, you know, oh, if it's not affecting me, that's not something I have to worry about. But it just wasn't at that time. Like the world, what ended up happening had not happened yet. And so, you know,
at least for a long time. So I guess moving forward, you know, it starts getting around, I want to say like September. It starts getting around September. And that was when they first started talking about, you know, like, I'm not saying people weren't always washing their hands and stuff, but that's when like you start noticing everybody's got like hand sanitizer with them all the time. And that's when they start talking about masking up and whatever. And the kind of the work that I do, I am typically by myself, probably I'd say like 95% of the time. I work by myself. My work doesn't generally require anybody else. And so like, again, I'm most of the time, I mean, the railroad mostly goes through the woods where we are. So this isn't a problem for me. And,
then I can't remember when like the schools went like homeschool or whatever they were doing, online virtual learning, whatever. But that really hadn't started yet. So like I said, it's like September, whatever, gets to be beginning of October. And probably more towards the end of September. So we decide to take a trip to Gatlinburg, like most people do from here, and go down there to stay at, what's it called, like the Wilderness, which is like a hotel with a. Can I talk about this?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Which is like a hotel with like a water park in it.
Right.
And we do that for the kids. We took one of my little girl's friends with us. And, we're in there playing, and it's getting to be fall. So it's colder outside. So in the fall, they have an outdoor water park, but in the fall they have to shut that down, and then they just have the indoor water park.
Right.
So, which is fine. That's great. And, I remember this moment sticks out in my mind. So clear. And I remember floating in the wave pool. And they've got like TVs mounted up showing whatever they're showing. And I just remember I didn't have my glasses on. And I remember floating there and just thinking like, it's not here. This isn't here. Maybe I could get it. But if I do, chances are I'm going to be fine, So I just kind of didn't think anything about it. Well, that evening, we're down playing or whatever, and my little boy starts complaining that he's not feeling good. And I take him, my wife asked me to take him up to the room for a while so the girls could play. So I take him up, and he's complaining about his throat hurting, and he's coughing. And I'm thinking like, here's another, sinus, whatever, just whatever cold. I mean, it could be any one of 1,000 other things before it would be this thing. I mean, and still to this day, So take him up to the room, get him settled down. He falls asleep, and I decide to lay down with him. And when I lay down with him, I fall asleep. Next thing I know, it's 4 hours later. And I wake up and I'm thinking, I just slept 4 hours on like a vacation, like on a nap. I mean, it's like 8:30. That's just strange. Like that I would be that tired. I mean, yeah, I had been swimming, and it does make you tired, but whatever. So Courtney asked me to, that's my wife. Courtney asked me to go out and, get some food for us. So I go out, get everybody McDonald's, whatever. And, we ended up waiting in a line to get McDonald's, Jesus, for like an hour. It was terrible. So on the way home, I'm like, I passed a Chinese place. And I'm like, I'll stop and get me some Chinese. So, get back to the hotel. We sit down to eat. And I kept telling Courtney, so many things it was just like, hey, dummy. But I was like, this is the blandest Chinese food I've ever tasted. It doesn't taste like anything. And she tasted it. She was like, it tastes fine to me. I was like, I don't know. I just don't think it tastes like anything. So the next day I wake up, my throat's hurting. I'm like, here it comes. I've done picked it up. And we go home. We get home. And I'm just thinking like, I'm treating a sore throat. I'm treating a cold, whatever. And it went on for, a few days was like that. The sore throat got worse. The sinuses got worse, whatever. But after a few days, I start sweating like crazy all day long. I mean, I was sweating through the blankets. I mean, I hate to say that. I was sweating through the sheets, sweating onto the mattress. My pillows were soaked. And I keep bringing this up to my wife, and, everybody, any other people, they would be like, do you have a fever? No, I don't have a fever. Then you don't have it. And that's what they were even telling everybody when I called and, did the what do you call it, like telemed thing. And that's what they asked me. Do you have a fever? Don't have a fever. You don't have it. You just got something else. Okay. Have you had your flu shot? Yeah. Well, you can still get the flu, whatever. So, just wasn't thinking much of it. And here I am. I'm going around to like church band practice. I'm working. Now, granted, again, I work by myself, but I'm just living my life and thinking like, man, something's going on with me. Like this cold is tearing me up. I don't know why I'm sweating like this. I mean, you're talking all day long, sweating in your clothes and whatever. So, it was, I want to say it was like a Tuesday. It's somewhere around like the 11th of October, something like that. And I wake up that morning and I just felt, I don't know what I felt like. I just felt like everything was like taking me double the effort. And I wasn't feeling very good as far as my stomach went. I get in the shower, feel sick. All of a sudden, I got to jump out of the shower and throw up. I throw up. Get back in the shower, get out, brush my teeth, whatever. I get dressed, go to walk out the front door, and immediately hits me again. Run to the edge of the porch, throw up off the side of the porch. Make it to my work truck, get a few minutes down the road, got to pull over and throw up. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, if this is the flu, this is awful. But again, I work by myself. So I'm thinking like, I'll just power through this day. And it'll be fine. I'll just be fine. Get to, not Premier. I always say Premier. Get to the top of Coaldale Mountain, have to pull over, throw up. I throw up at my office and I'm thinking like, good night. I don't have anything left to throw up. Chugging water, all day. And I was like, I'll just get my work done for the day. I'll go to Rotorfield. That was the last location I ended up checking. And go down there, check that location. And I just remember my chest hurting like crazy. Just not like, I don't really know what to say. It was like a tight feeling, but almost like when I would cough, like there was like a pinch to it. And I just, again, it felt like the whole day felt like the air was like 5 times thicker. Like I was moving with like weights on me or something. And I called my boss up and I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to I think I need to go to the doctor. I'm just not feeling right. He's like, all right, go get checked out. So ride back up to Bluefield, go to the Med Express and call them. And there's like a line out the door and they're like, we'll send a nurse out to your vehicle. Nurse comes out with a mask and whatever. And she tells me she's going to give me a COVID test. Takes that thing and jams it. At the time, that was still that test where they like jammed it to the back of your throat. Yeah. To gag you. They swabbed both your nostrils and the lady's like, okay, it'll take 15 to 20 minutes for it to come back and we'll come back out and talk to you. That woman was not gone 5 minutes and came back and was like, yeah, you definitely have it. And I'm kind of horrified, but again, thinking like chances are I'm fine. Chances are, and that's even what she said. She said it's going to be like a bad flu, and you should just go home, drink plenty of fluids, lay down, sleep it off till it's over. You'll have to isolate. I can't remember what the quarantine time was at the time.
I think it was it a month?
I was thinking it was like 10 days or something like that.
That sounds familiar. And around this time too, did you ever notice like they had the body count stuff going on the news and things like that? Like, did you get really nervous in the beginning or were you kind of just...
So, that was right when that had started. So again, you have to remember that when I got it was right when West Virginia like tipped over the hump, like started going downhill. Up until that time, West Virginia, like I said, across the country was showing like the best numbers, and and they didn't know why.
I remember that. It
people
started in California and worked its way
Right.
across. Yeah. Washington.
and so there were people dying from it at the time, but I remember them talking about it was elderly people for the most part, and people who were already sick. So that's in my head. I mean, it had really, in that past couple weeks, it had really started like picking up to where you would hear people talk about like the hospital's full and they've set up like a designated area for it specifically, and that stuff was scary. And I remember calling Courtney and thinking like, I've got to be like quarantined. I've got to be like, I can't be around any of the rest of you. So I come home, I tell my work. They're like, whatever. I call my work, tell them whatever, and get that taken care of. I go home, set up in the bedroom, lay down, go to sleep. Like, that's the rule. Like, kids can't be around daddy. Mommy can only like hand stuff in, nobody can be around me. So I get to, I just slept. And at first, again, it just wasn't, I still felt that like awful, like tiredness. They had me go pick up an O2 sensor and keep checking my oxygen at all times. And it was hovering around like 90 at the time, which is not terrible. I have a good friend who's a pulmonologist, Seth Hall. Shout out Seth. But and he really like guided me through. I mean, before I get into like what winds up happening, I just want to point out how, like, when I got it, I was like one of the first people in all the people I knew that got it.
He was the first I knew, 100%.
And it scared everybody to death. And I think a lot of that was because they know, like, work wise and time wise, how isolated I am. I'm not saying I never get with friends or whatever, but I just typically don't have a lot of time to even do that. And so, again, it scared everybody. But that said, I have people instantly, people got things together for the kids, sent meals to the house, gift cards, all this stuff. And I'm kind of thinking like, is this that serious? Like, okay. I mean, so that said, breathing starts getting worse and worse, start just hacking my lungs out. And after a few days of it, I remember being on the phone with a guy from church who called me, an older man, Mr. Hurley, wonderful guy, owns Hurley's greenhouses, and he calls me up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Hurley's.
You know what I'm talking about? Yep. So he calls me up and he's like, "Do you need anything?" And I was like, "Actually, I hate to ask this, but my grass needs mowed, and I haven't been out to." The kids been walking the dogs, and they were a lot younger then. I was like, so I can't say, like, as far as the dog poop situation goes, I can't say how good that is. But me telling that right then sounds like I'm talking to him normally. But I suddenly realized that when I was on the phone with him, that I'm talking to him and I'm going, "Thank you for your help. I appreciate it." And I'm having trouble like holding a breath long enough to get even a few words out at a time. And it's just not getting better. And like I said, I kept doing what they said. They said, lay down, sleep it off. Come to find out, I find out in the hospital actually that every doctor that I would come across or nurse said, that's the worst thing you could have done.
And we know now.
But they all said that. And so I want to say I'm like 4 or 5 days in. Oh, I mean, even let me go back to people helping out. I even had a pharmacist friend of mine, Daniel Wells. He drops off all this stuff on my porch. It was like tons of vitamins and, what do you call it? Colloidal silver cough drops and whatever. Just tons of stuff to try to like build me up, get my vitamin D up, get all this stuff, echinacea, all this stuff. And a lot of that, I really do think a lot of that is why I ended up better off. But anyway, so it keeps going down. My oxygen levels just keep going down over the days. And this one day, it got down. I want to say it got down in like the low 80s. And I'm having trouble like thinking. I'm coughing so hard. I'm throwing up all the time. I can't keep anything down, even water. And this one night just got really scary. I like destroy our bathroom, like falling and like panicking and not like pooping everywhere.
Sure.
So yeah, end up messing up our bathroom, whatever. And my dad comes and gets me, and he takes me over to the ER at Princeton. So they get me in there, they take me back, and they're like, yeah, he's got COVID, whatever. And they do an X-ray. And they're like, your lungs are just full of pneumonia. And they gave me, I forget what they call, they're Tessalon pearls. I always think it always reminds me of Star Wars.
Right.
They gave me like Tessalon pearls, and maybe they gave me an inhaler that night, but I really can't remember much of it. What I do remember about it is that I get outside when they let me go finally, and my dad's waited out there the whole time.
Yeah, because you couldn't go in.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and not to mention, when you go in there, everybody in there had COVID. So they sent me back outside. Well, what I had failed to realize was like this second that cold air hit my lungs, I start hacking my brains out, and I'm standing there in the parking lot, like coughing up like bloody sputum and just throwing up. It's terrible. But they've sent me home, so I'm like, okay, let's go home. So Dad takes me home. Court makes me sit up in the recliner that night, so I'd be sitting up. They told me that night in the hospital, they said, do not lay down. So like I said, I sat in the recliner all night. I just felt terrible. No fever this whole time, by the way. Never had a fever. So just in case it's not clear by now, you do not have to have all of the symptoms to have it. I know now it's a lot less, and I guess everybody mostly had it so that it doesn't affect people near as badly as it did then. But at the time, we thought, oh, I don't have this fever. I'm good, but that's not how it works. So I go home, go to bed, or go to recliner, and wake up the next day just as sick. Tessalon pearls didn't touch it. Nothing would touch it. Again, I can't remember if I had an inhaler, but I couldn't take a deep enough breath to even use it.
So it was just short breaths, kind of?
Really short breaths and very shallow breathing, whatever. And my friend Adam's dad, Danny Culver, actually had messaged me to tell me about pursed lip breathing. So pursed lip breathing is when you, it's exactly what it sounds like. So what you'll do is you inhale as much as, as much as you can. And then on the exhale, you purse your lips. And what that does is it puts back pressure on your lungs and gives your lungs enough time to be able to absorb the oxygen that you're taking in. And you can do that for a lot of things. Actually, it's not just like if you're sick, if you have like anxiety or something like that, it's a good way to like calm I think it's called your vagal nerve or whatever. But anyway, it helps to like get more oxygen in your blood. So that was actually helping. But that night, it always seemed like the nights were worse. I think that has something to do with like the way like the barometric pressure changes and all that. But that night it got the worst. That night it dipped down in the 70s, and I was just like out of my mind. And I'm not going to bring up his name, but I had a friend years ago. One of my best friends had cancer, and I always say lung cancer just so I don't have to explain it, but it really wasn't. But his affected his breathing. And I used to go visit him when I was out of town. He was up in the hospital at Charleston, and I would go visit him. And I remember this one day I was visiting him, and he takes it's called cannulae, or the cannulae. You know what I'm talking about? The thing they like wrap over your ears and put in your nose. And he rips that thing apart and he puts it in his mouth, and he's sucking it like it was like it's a straw, trying to get enough air to breathe. And that image will stick with me for my whole life. That scared me to death to see that. And I start thinking about that. And it could have actually been equal parts anxiety and whatever and panic as much as it was the breathing. But I'm just telling you that when you can't breathe, there's almost no other thought in your head. Just, you're like, this thing that your body does every day is just not happening. I mean, we all know what it's like to be short of breath, but usually, you can stop and catch your breath, and it was not happening. So my wife calls Princeton, tells them I have to come back out there immediately. They say they don't have any beds, and they're going to have to turn me to Blacksburg. So Dad comes, gets me. My kids are freaking out, crying, just screaming their heads off, terrified. I'm like, it's okay. I'm going to be all right. And so we get in Dad's truck and start going down the road, and Dad's going to take 81 to go towards Blacksburg. And my wife calls me back, and she's like, they're turning us away. They don't have any, they're too full. They don't have anybody. So everybody's freaking out. Like, what are we going to do? Princeton calls back. And at the time I didn't realize what it meant, but Princeton calls back and says, we just had a bed open up, which, you know what that means. So, dad turns around and zooms me to Princeton. I go to get out of the truck. I'm wobbly as hell. I can't hardly walk. And, I make it just inside the door. And right as I went to take a step, and I just fall. And these nurses come out, they get a wheelchair, whatever. And, I just remember, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm like half out of my head, but I just remember looking at my dad and saying, like, I'm going to die. And being like, I can't believe this is happening. And he's looking at me. I mean, my dad's looking at me, terrified. So, they wheel me back, they take me straight back. There's no wait of any kind. They take me back. They get me on oxygen, whatever. They take me back for another X-ray, and I'm actually friends with the guy. Don't want to, they're twins, so I hate to misspeak and say the wrong name. I think it was Josh Sears. But anyway, I ask him if I can see it, and they show it to me, and it's even worse this time. The whole lung is it's like somebody just drew it with chalk. It's completely white. And he's like, yeah, your lungs are full of it. And he was like, it's worse. It's worse tonight than it was last night. Anyway, they get me back. They take me up to, I can't remember what floor it was, but they had it set up. It was an ICU floor. So every patient that had COVID at that time is in their own room. And it is I forget what they call it. I want to say it's called like a positive pressure room, where it's constantly sucking the air out of that room,
Right.
out and into the open air.
Mm-hmm.
So they get me back there, get me all hooked up. They give me some kind of, it was some kind of plasma infusion. And I wish I knew the name of that right now, but it wasn't any kind of, I know this is not meant to start any arguments or anything, but there was talk of like, I think people were talking about like ivermectin or stuff. I never got anything like that. I had some kind of, that's exactly it.
Convalescent plasma
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah.
Which uses blood from people who've recovered from illness to help others get better.
Yeah. So they give me that. And I remember the doctor comes in, and it was this young woman she seemed like she was younger than me. And I asked her, of course, like this whole time I'm crying my eyes out, which is not helping my breathing at all. And I looked at her and I asked her, I said, am I going to die? And she said, we don't know. And I mean, you talk about your blood just running cold. You're thinking like, I'm not going to say it again because it'll get me all teared up, but you're just thinking like, was that the last time I saw my kids or whatever? So anyway, they leave me in there. And it's also important to note that in order for them to come into your room and deal with you, did you ever see, of course you saw E.T.
Yep.
So you remember when they find E.T. out in the river and Elliot's sick, and every person that comes in there to talk to Elliot is like in a hazmat suit and talking to him through that plastic, whatever. It was like that. So in order for them to come into your room, it takes them 10 minutes to get in that stuff. I mean, they had like, I forget what they call it, some kind of like filtration thing on the back of their, I mean, it was just really surreal to see.
Yeah.
And so, I'm in there the first night, and they've got me on oxygen. They're giving me this, whatever. They gave me a ton of medications. I wish I could remember them all, but the next day was the worst day of all. I'm just not doing good. I'm not being able to take breaths very deeply. It also, so when they finally got me settled, it was around 4 a.m. And then, if you've ever stayed in a hospital, they're coming in there like every hour, every couple hours, whatever. So you're not getting any sleep anyway. And I can't remember what they had my oxygen on. But anyway, like I said, they would come in. I'm feeling terrible. The second day, though, was different in a way that it was more scary at the time. Again, you can only talk to people on the phone. Nobody can come see you. Nobody can bring you anything.
Could you talk on the phone?
I couldn't hardly talk on the phone. The way I was talking to him when I was talking about that earlier, that's how I had to talk to people. But the second day, I start running a fever, and it doesn't even get up. I mean, crazy high. Got up like high 102, something like that, which is still a pretty good fever. And again, this whole time I've been sweating like crazy. And this second day, it got to where, here I am laying in this bed, and every time if I would turn my head, or I would flex my hand or adjust my elbow to be like more comfortable or whatever in this bed, my heart rate starts shooting through the roof. And so like I'm trying to move as little as possible, because every time, I mean, it was like this buildup where your heart is like this like ever increasing drum, where like, yeah, you move your hand and all of a sudden your heart goes boom, 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 and just gets louder or harder and harder. And then eases itself back down. And I'm talking simple motor function, just, just turning your head, moving your leg, wiggling your toes. I mean, everything was causing it. So, I had the most wonderful nurse in the world. Her name was Barbie Pugh. And she was an angel. She took care of me. I mean, listen, if you met her, she is a ray of sunshine, and this woman might be 5 foot tall, but she is wonderful. And, she took care of me. I mean, anybody who's been sick in that sort of way, to have to now depend on people to like bathe you or help you go to the bathroom is that's what nurses are there for. But it still doesn't stop you from being like, this is embarrassing. And I feel like all this shame that comes with it, somebody standing there watching you go number 2, or what. And they kept the door shut, but they do that because if you fall, they got to be there. So,
what's your energy level from 1 to 10 at this point? Like,
it's like, I would say like a 1 would be generous. I mean, you just don't have anything. I mean, what the only funny thing that happened, and I don't care to tell it because listen, if you ain't joined this club, you will join it one day. So I'm laying there, and they had given me some hospital food, and I was able to keep some food down. Well, I hadn't eaten. My body hadn't held on to anything in days. So I'm just going to tell you, your stomach, once it gets that food in it, it's like, all right, let's get going. So I'm laying there, and the pain started hitting me. So I call them, and I'm like, hey, I need to go to the bathroom really bad. And they're like, okay, we'll be there. Well, you got to know even if they're able to make it right there, buddy, it's 5-10 minutes before they're in that room. I mean, and you can look at them, but they just can't come in there. I mean, they got to protect themselves, and they have to do this in between patients as well. So if they're making rounds, they have to get dressed, go in this guy's room, take care of this guy, come out, get undressed, go to this guy's room, get dressed. And I mean, it was a huge production. So here I am waiting, and I holler back. I'm like, I'm not kidding. I don't mean to be a pain. I find myself being way too apologetic sometimes when I shouldn't, but I don't like to bother people. So I'm like, I'm not kidding. I have to go. And they're like, we'll be right there. They're coming. They're getting dressed. And that was like, hey, you're going to have to do this. So I go to stand up. As soon as I stand up, take a step on the ground. All over myself.
Yeah.
And so I'm laying there, and I'm just like, you just feel so defeated, man. Like, what is this? What is my life?
Right.
And they're sitting there reassuring you, like, baby, it happens.
It's every day.
It's okay, sweetheart. That's what we're here for. Whatever. They took such good care of me. But my fever was bad that day. Or, like I said, what it was. Well, Barbie goes home, and I had another nurse come in. Her name was Cheyenne. I really can't remember her last name off the top of my head, but she was wonderful too. So she comes in and takes care of me, and I'm laying there talking about my kids and whatever. And she's just super nice. She's really quiet. What I got to meet of her,
Sure.
I'm just a patient, but she was just absolutely wonderful too. I want to say it was Cheyenne Trivet, maybe was her last name. I think maybe she's got married, but I can't remember. But again, these nurses were angels. So
And it's new for them too. Like they're going in and are able to have these bright personalities every day going into this situation that,
Yeah.
they're like, well, eventually I'm going to get it. I mean, essentially.
Right. And you got to realize like Barbie's older than I am. I don't know her age or whatever, but, I want to say she's in her upper 40s, maybe early 50s. I don't know. And this was at that time. So I don't know now. And Cheyenne is way younger than me. And so almost a brand new nurse, and I'm not to take away from like her skill set or her knowledge or anything like that, but imagine thinking you're going to be a nurse in a hospital, you're going to deliver babies, take care of sick people, and a pandemic happens that nobody has ever seen this, And anyway, that she talked to me that night, and I just remember being like in and out of it. I get really bad when I get fevers, which is not very often. My dreams become so vivid. They're the definition of fever dreams, and I'm kind of in and out of it. And I remember moaning. She goes out of the room and turns off the lights. And I remember I'm laying there moaning and I'm crying, and you can hear everybody else that was on that floor doing the same thing. Just like a whole floor of people laying there crying and coughing, and you could hear people trying to pray. It's just surreal and terrifying, And I fall asleep. And that ends up being the thing I'm really here to talk about. So again, I'm kind of in and out. And you know what I'm saying? When you've had those fevers and you're waking up every few minutes and you're just uncomfortable and whatever. And on top of that, I can't breathe and I'm hacking my brains out and whatever. There's one little detail I had forgotten to mention, and that was a doctor had come in with Barbie. I can't remember his name at all, so I'm not even going to try. But he tells me that my oxygen numbers are not improving at all, and that if they don't, the next morning they're going to put me on a ventilator. And he goes through the whole process telling me about, how they sedate you and whatever. And I'm terrified of that, because I've known one person in my life that came off of a ventilator. And I've not known anybody else, and this doctor is telling me the process that they'll go through, and he's trying to explain it in a way that like it's a way to give your body a break, and whatnot. And so I'm terrified of that as well. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know the numbers on positive outcomes for people on ventilators, but in my life, it has not seemed like a great thing.
Sure.
Or at least it's terrifying. So I had that on me. As soon as he told me, I'd break down crying. I'm terrified of that. So anyway, I'm in and out of my.
Do you remember what day this was of your hospital stay?
I want to say it was day 3. I want to say. Sorry, I have to move that.
How much have you gotten to talk to Courtney, or did you talk to your kids or anything?
I would send them pictures of me. I did FaceTime them a little bit, but I would just get you're talking like 20, 30 seconds. I would get so immediately drained from it that it would, Courtney would just be like, okay, get kids, daddy's tired. We're going to have to let him go. And I've got people messaging me, not just people sending message after message, hang in there, whatever. It's one lady, I'll never forget, her name's Shannon Stoddard. And well, it was when we were in high school. I can't remember her new name, but she sends me a message that's like, I've got a whole church full of little old ladies praying for you, you know, and I still think about that. I'm like, well, if that's what I got, I'm going to be good.
Which no matter your religious standpoint, like that's a good feeling.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, and I'm telling, every time they tell me something, I'm texting Courtney to tell her, you know, what's going on. And they're, you know, so she's then updating people on Facebook and whatever. And I'll tell you that I won't ever talk about that story, but there's only one other time in my life I've never felt as lonely as I did then. Don't get me wrong, it's a wonderful feeling to know you got so many people rooting for you and praying for you and helping out your family and whatever. But being in that room and knowing you're kind of 5 to 10 minutes away from if anything happens, I mean, it just feels like you're on an island, you know.
Did they explain how long you would be out?
No, they just told me
until it works.
Till it works, you know. And again, to this day I don't remember. I don't know the process. Like, you know, I know they sedate you and whatever, and I know they have to like insert a tube and the machine does all the whatever. But yeah, but I just want to stress that in that time, Barbie and Cheyenne would make me sit on the edge of the bed and sit up. And I mean, and even like I said, when I tried to raise again, my heart rate's, my blood pressure's just going nuts. And, but they would do that and they would have me do that pursed lip breathing, which I told them I had learned about. And so, yeah, again, I mean, just these women are taking excellent care of me. Everybody was. I have no complaint about Princeton Hospital as far as that goes. So again, we're talking like the third night. I've got this fever, and they're giving me whatever they're giving me for it. And she goes out of the room. Here I am laying there sleeping, trying to sleep. And sometimes when I tell the story, I had to write it down the next morning, you know. But sometimes when I tell the story, I don't even talk about it like they're dreams, because they felt so tangible. They like there was so much sensation to it that it felt like a real life, but like a whole other life. Like it just, I don't really know what to say about it. So
like an out of body experience, or
so that's how the first part of it starts. The first part of it starts where I'm going to try to lay out some like imagery as far as this goes. And the only thing, I was having trouble even explaining it to you, but it's like I'm looking at like a mahogany piece of wood, like a vast mahogany piece of wood that is almost like chocolate, and it goes on forever in any direction I'm looking at. And I start seeing these images, these like moving images of people being like almost with a snap kind of feeling to it and a sound being snapped towards me out of the wood, like just enough to be different. And they're moving, and they're all these different kinds of people, and they're interacting with each other, and they're dancing, but every movement they make is making like a new snap in the wood. It's almost like, what was the toy I was telling you about last night?
The toy with the needles. I'll bring it up here.
There was a toy like you used to find it in the toy store or Spencer Gifts or whatever, and it was like a piece of plexiglass with 4 bolts or spacers, and there you go. It's like a pin art toy. And remember, you could put your hand behind it, and it would show the outline of your hand in the pins. You know, people put it on their face or whatever they do, but which I always thought was kind of gross in a store.
Right.
Like, man, you know how many people touch that? But anyway, I'm sitting here watching this happen, and I'm hearing all this, like, this music, like these drums, and the drums stick out. It's not foreboding. It's not happy. It's just, they're happening. And it really is kind of like almost like hand drums, like a, and I'm just watching it. Like, you know, I don't know what to make of it. And that's when this woman, she shows up in those images. And I don't know. You'd think in all this time I'd have given her a name or something. In my dream, she doesn't tell me a name. She reaches out to me, and she kind of comes out of it, and she is this beautiful black woman. In this dream or whatever I'm having, she even has, like, you know, kind of like I guess they call it an afro or whatever. And she's kind of dressed in like gold and purple, and when she moves, there's kind of like red around her, like in the I don't want to say the light, because there was no light. It's all darkness behind her, but there's like red behind her. And she's talking to me, and she's saying things like, she's telling me that, like, she's always been with me. She's always been looking out for me. And I'm going to be okay, and to come with her. And, you know, in my dream, I just remember feeling like so small, like a kid. And she's just saying things to me like, it's okay, baby. It's okay. You're going to be okay. Just come with me. And I remember reaching up and like taking her hand. And all of a sudden we just like dissipate. So there are different sections of this like dream. But again, they're not dreams. It's not like something I'm watching so much as like something I'm experiencing or something that I am. And, you know, I've told the story to people sometimes, and they're like, what the hell did they give you? You know? But when we dissipate, we kind of turn into, I don't know what to say. It's like when you see a shooting star or a comet represented in a movie, and it flying through space, and it's this kind of ball of light that's like spitting off lights of like the same color, you know, like a sparkler,
right?
Where you've got the center that's burning bright, and the lights that fly off are trailing away. But she's like, I want to say she's like a red light, and I'm like a blue light. It's like two comets. And here's this white one going through the middle, and we're circling around each other and around this light. And I just want to make clear, there's no like romantic anything in this at all. In this, my whole time I'm thinking like this person is motherly, and this person loves me, and this person says they've been there watching me and taking care of me my whole life. And they're always there in some capacity, and they don't say anything like I'm not going to make it up and be like, you know, in 1987 when you skinned your knee, I was like, you know, whatever. But it is like, I've been there. I've always been there. And she's talking to me as we are these lights, and we're flying through. I don't know what else to say, but like space, like there are whole star. It's just like I'm flying through a night sky. It's like that. I don't know if you remember that old Windows screensaver.
Oh, yes.
That was like the star field, but
Mhm.
it's like that. And I don't know anything about that white light in the middle of us. I don't know anything about that. It's not even addressed. But she tells me, she was like, I want you to see something. Man, that brings back memories.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. Zoom in here.
Yeah, it's almost like when you're driving through the snow at night,
Mhm.
So she tells me, she wants me to see something. And so all of a sudden, I'm in like a forest at night, and I can tell from the way it feels there that it's like it's somewhere in between spring and summer. It's still sort of cool. It's kind of humid, the kind of humidity that makes you clammy, but it's still kind of cool, And I'm in this forest, and the trees are pretty thin. They haven't really started getting their leaves yet, but you can see like the buds coming in. It's pitch black, and ahead of me, like when I turn my head to the right, I see this, like it's like a bar. That's all I know to call it. And outside of it, there are all these there are all these motorcycles parked. Like you would see in a movie about like a motorcycle gang or whatever. And they're all just parked there. And there's all these just like terrible screams and all this like really angry noise and fighting and fussing and yelling and cussing, and you can hear like smashing glass like you'd hear in a bar fight in a movie or something like that. And I'm looking at it, and like there's smoke coming out of it. You could smell cigarettes in the air. You could smell beer. Like you just it just exactly what it was. And I remember seeing a light off to my left, just enough that it makes me turn my head. And when I do, it's kind of misty there as the light's lighting it up. And I see there's a figure in it. And this person starts walking closer. And as they start walking closer, I realize what I'm looking at. And I again, I'm a little too apologetic, but I realize that it's every image of Jesus I've ever seen in my whole life. The robe, like the white robe, the whatever. And he's just walking like steadfast, staring at this bar. And I'm just watching, thinking like, I just want to touch him, but I don't move. And I'm not even sure if I could. And as he approaches, these noises get louder and they get angrier, and it's just whatever's going on in this building is terrible. And in my mind, I know that what's going on in that building is awful. And as he gets closer to it, he stops and he stares at it, and he just sticks a hand out. And when he sticks his hand out, this light shines from it at that place. And there's all these like screams, and it's like the light flashes, like shines on the outside, and all of a sudden you see it illuminate the inside, and you hear all these like groans and these screams, and then the light just bursts out of every window and doorway and whatever in the place. And like you see, like, I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to call it. If it was smoke, I don't know what to say about it. It starts like rising up. And with that, it's like all that sound is in that smoke that's coming out of that place. And he just turns and walks back into the dark, and it fades. And I'm just standing there, just amazed, but like in total darkness in my head. And there she is again. And she's got me by the hand. And she asked me to dance with her. And again, not in any kind of romantic way or whatever. This is literally just like two people dancing around being goofy. And I can't see me. Everything that's happening to me is like me sitting here right now. I can see my hands, and I can, I don't remember seeing my body or whatever, but I remember, moving with her, and she's laughing and she's talking about like, living and how lucky we are to be able to experience life and whatnot. And I'm laughing with this woman, and she never, except for like when we become the lights, she never changes. She's the same the whole time. And just the calmest, happiest voice. And she, somewhere in that time, like I said, this dream is really hard to gauge time with, because like I said, I'm kind of in and out of it the whole time.
Between reality and the dream?
Yeah.
Or?
It's really hard for me to gauge, because everything going on, like I would wake up, and that would seem like a few seconds, but the dream just felt like every second was like a year. It felt like, I mean, in a good way, it felt like the way that any good thing that's ever happened to you, you might stop and think, I wish this moment could last forever. And it was like that, except it felt like it did.
It sounds like close to a break for you. Like, okay, I don't have to like be absorbed in my pain and how much,
Yeah. And I've thought that. I have thought that maybe that's what this was. Maybe this was my body or my mind's way of giving me a break. We talked last night about, like, for all I know, my brain is releasing a crap ton of DMT.
Oh, yeah.
And just dumping it in me.
Yeah. Which the part about that is, I've always read and heard that your body releases DMT like right before you die.
Right.
So I was just wondering, like, is this, is it part what they gave you, but also like, is your brain saying like, okay, well, here's what you need because
you're on your way.
What's
out.
next? Yeah.
I will tell you that with this woman, I never had any moment of fear. There was, every time she spoke to me, she would keep telling me, kept calling me baby. She kept saying, it's okay, baby. It's okay. You're okay. You're not leaving. You're okay. And she tells me, I feel like I'm leaving something out.
Well, I know there's another piece of the dream. You mentioned the dog.
So she tells me that I'm going to be okay and not to worry. And, I tell her, I say, I don't want to lose you. I need you. I didn't know, like, again, not romantic at all. Just like, I didn't know that I had you with me. And now that I know, I need you to take care of me, and she's like, I'm going to be here. And, I kind of wake up in my room and I never see her again. I do recognize her from another dream that I had years ago when I had a fever, when I had pneumonia. Um, do you care if I branch off for a second?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. To explore who this person may be, or
So I'd gotten pneumonia in the winter time, and I was having to do a bunch of test work outside. It was snowing like crazy, and I wound up getting pneumonia. It was terrible. So I was kind of took myself downstairs and set up in front of the fireplace. And I typically try to think, maybe I can sweat this out whenever I'm sick. Like that's what I need to do. I need to sweat this thing out. So I sat up in front of the fireplace and I fell asleep. And it's more so passing out. It was so bad that when I got home and I got out of my work truck, I fell out of my work truck and got up off the ground, and I get in the house and I just like fall asleep on the couch. When I fall asleep, I have this dream or whatever. It didn't feel like a dream again. It felt like I was this person. And in this dream or whatever it was, I'm this old man. And I know I'm an old man. I know my body feels old. I can look at my hands. They're wrinkled and veiny, and I'm hooked up to an IV and I'm on oxygen. And I know this, and I'm so confused by it in this dream. Like why am I this person now? And this nurse, who's obviously my nurse, like I'm in my dream, I'm sitting by a pool outside in a deck chair, like is that what they call those? Or a lounge chair,
like an Adirondack, or
well, this is more of a like you lay down on it. Is that a lounge chair?
It sounds like, yeah. Okay, sounds right.
So I'm laying on one of those, and I start to panic in my dream, and this woman comes up. Now I didn't recognize, of course, I'd never seen this woman in my life, and she is my nurse, and she comes over, tells me I'm okay. She's like, calm down. You're okay. I've got you. I'll take care of you. And when she pats me on the hand, I fall back asleep in my dream, and I wake up in my real life in front of the fireplace. And I sit there thinking about it, and I end up nodding back off. And when I go back to sleep, I wake up again as this old man. And once again, she comes over to me and does the same thing. You're okay, baby. It's okay. And the creepy thing about that is that prior to this dream, and this happened 4 or 5 times in that dream or whatever, I would wake up and I'd be okay, and I'd fall asleep and I'd be waking up as this distressed, sickly old man, and she'd be there to tell me I was okay. And I'd never recognized her until the COVID dream, hallucination, whatever. So anyway, she tells me, I'm going to be okay. And I wake up in my room, back to COVID. So I wake up in my room, and again, I'm out of it. I'm just kind of out of my mind. I can hear people again trying to moan, coughing. I do remember an old man just howling. And at my feet on the bed, there's a yellow dog laying like right beside of my legs. And I would look at the hospital at the door, and I would hear these noises, and I just remember being scared of them. And there was this light that would come up under the door whenever the noise would get loud. And when it would happen, this dog would perk up, and his ears would perk up, and the hair on the nape of his neck would stand up, and he would start growling and just snarling, and I would pet him. And I like it's so crazy to talk about because I just remember like feeling like the hair on the back of his neck and like just doing this, like petting him, And when he would do that, when he would snarl or he would growl, and he would perk up like that, that noise would be, and that light would be scared away. And it would just keep happening, and there was no pattern to it. It wasn't like every couple minutes or whatever. It wouldn't be like that for a while. And then all of a sudden that noise would come around and that dog would perk up again and growl and snarl and whatever. And I would pet him. And I just even remember like almost making a fist, like not like you're pulling it, but I just remember even doing kind of this in his fur and thinking like, I'm okay. It's okay. And there was something about that dog that was like that woman. And the only way I really know to rationalize it is to say, like, I don't know, like maybe in some way, like I can't be there in that form with you, but I can be there with you in that form. And like, you've got to understand that, like, I wake up the next morning, I finally fall asleep. This stops happening. And I wake up and I still remember my hand being on my hospital gown or my blanket, whatever, and doing this with my hand to that dog.
Kind of scratching the dog.
Scratching the dog and realizing that, like, there's no dog. And I just couldn't get that out of my head. I can't get it out of my head.
So it's kind of like a metaphorical representation of comfort, of like motherhood, like you mentioned, like a protector.
Yeah.
Both of them. Or, you never thought of necessarily anyone this particularly could be. Like you still don't know.
I still don't know. There's nobody I've ever met that I can recall. I like to think that maybe there's somebody I don't look at every now and again, and that's her maybe watching me or something, but that's just the writer in me, I guess.
Sure. Do you know the span of time that occurred between when you went under to when you started to come back into reality, we'll call it?
The only thing I know is I want to say, I might be wrong, man. I want to say they traded off at like 9:00. I want to say, and that might not even be right. I just remember, because you got to realize, like, the window is covered up. Even they've got those things sucking all the whatever out of the window, so the window's even covered up. So the only way I really even know it's dark outside is by like out where you could see through the glass doors. But I know the next morning when I wake up, I don't know what woke me up. I mean, again, in a hospital, I mean, good God, there's 1,000 noises at any given time. But I remember, I sat up on the edge of the bed like Barbie had taught me, and I was waiting for Barbie to come in. So it must have been 8 or 9 in the morning, because I think, don't they typically work 12-hour shifts?
Mm-hmm.
So it was sometime, I mean, in between Barbie leaving and Cheyenne coming in, and then Cheyenne leaving and Barbie coming in. So I wake up, I sit on the edge of the bed, I'm practicing my pursed lip breathing, and a nurse that I never saw, I had never seen her before, I never saw her after this, sticks her head in the door, which was unusual. considering the amount of like junk they had to put on to come in there, for this nurse to do that. And no, this wasn't this was not part of this fever dream. This really happened. So she sticks her head in there, and she just out of nowhere, she says, "Hey, the doctor will be in here in a minute. They're coming to put you on the vent." And when she said that, I mean, I just start sobbing as best I can. And
so the dream was before the vent.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I'm with you.
So so here I am thinking like, okay, I mean, he said what he said. He said if they hadn't improved the next morning, they were coming in to put me on that vent. And so that nurse said that, and I start sobbing and whatever. Well, I see Barbie come up and start getting dressed to come in my room. And she comes in and she says, "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" And I said, I was like, "I don't want to be on this ventilator. I'm terrified of that." And she goes, "They're not putting you on a ventilator." She said, "Your numbers didn't come up much, but they leveled out." She said, "But I'm not allowed to tell you that." She said, "The doctor will come in here and tell you." So I'm just sitting there thinking like, she said, "Who told you that?" And I said, "I don't know who that was. I've never seen that woman before." And the doctor comes in and he tells me, he says, your oxygen went up by about a point, but it went up.
Yeah, so that's a big deal.
He says, "So we're going to watch you for a couple of days. And if it continues to go up, then we're going to move you to the CCU, which is a lot less serious than the intensive care unit." And I'm telling you, that dude leaves my room and Barbie leaves. And I'm telling you, I sat there crying, just so happy, sitting there praying. And, text Courtney. She sends it out to everybody, whatever. I got all these people praying. By the next morning, it had come up probably 10 points or so. And it keeps coming up. They moved me to the critical care unit. Now let me tell you something else about the critical care unit. So the intensive care unit, they are up your butt. You're in there for a reason. They need to be looking at you a lot. The critical care unit, we'll come check on you in a little bit. And so by that time, again, I've had like one or two meals, and look, hospital food. Listen, those people are doing the best with what they got, but it just ain't nothing like home cooking or even eating out. It's
sure. It's nutrients.
It's nutrients
in some form,
and not a lot of salt, and whatever. So I'm just going to step back a second and
sure.
And just mention that you also need to realize that when I got COVID, my wife gets diagnosed with COVID like 3 days later. And then my father-in-law that lives with us gets diagnosed with it as well, like 2 days after that. So my whole house is quarantined. Kids can't go to school, whatever. So my wife is dealing with this and dealing with my father-in-law and whatever, while also having to take care of me before I go in the hospital. So then, they get over it while I'm in the hospital. My wife didn't have her sense of smell back for like over a year. My father-in-law still, years later, you're talking 4 years, can't taste things, can't smell things. So I just say that as an aside, that was what people were going through. But anyway, back to the critical care unit. So one day they come in and they're like, "Okay, your oxygen, we've got it at like 90, 91. we're going to send you on home. And I'm thinking like, how did I go from somebody telling me they didn't know if I was going to die to like this one horrible night to now I'm going home and there are like people dying. And again, when I would talk to the doctors, I mean, you know how I am. I'm just, dude, if you put me in a room with one person I ain't never met in my life, I'm going to talk to them. And, I would talk to this doctor or I would talk to any of them and they'd be like, well, what do you call it? What did I call it? Urgent care, Med Express or whatever. Mm-hmm. What did they tell you to do? And I tell them and they would say, that's what's killing everybody. Laying down is killing everybody. So to this day, the minute I find out somebody has it, I'm really quick to message them and say like, hey, you got to get your ass up. You got to move. You don't want to move. You can't be laying down. You got to sit up. You got to walk around, whatever. You got to. I mean, there are so many things that are, I tend to liken things to books and movies. I remember sitting at the house and before I even went coughing up, and I remember coughing into a tissue and you look and it's full of blood. Well, in a movie, what is that? Well, in a movie that says
cancer, usually
that's the point in the movie where you say, okay, this person's going to die. This is bad. But let me tell you, it's not like that necessarily. It doesn't always have to be like that. Blood in your sputum. God, that's a disgusting word, but it is what it is, man. That's pretty common with pneumonia.
What caused Walter White to sell meth?
There you go. And so, yeah, and that turned out great.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I'm saying is that was the point. And when I think back on it, there were so many points that were just like, this was when I should have known. This was a bad thing. This was a good thing. This was a, whatever. But I mean this as far as the dream goes. I end up going home and end up being in respiratory therapy for a year and a half.
Long time off work.
Like 2 weeks took me out of work for a year and a half.
Do you think that, because I didn't realize, like I said, we haven't really gotten to depth about this, but I didn't realize you weren't ventilated. Do you think if you were ventilated that there's a chance you wouldn't be here? Or, I know like back then we really didn't know. And it came out later that ventilators were causing some people to backslide. And
yeah, I mean, I ended up, because I was like one of the, I don't want, man, when I tell this, I don't mean to sound selfish or what am I trying to say, like self-centered in any way. But I think because I was the first person that a lot of the people I know knew that had it. From then on, when someone had a loved one that had it, I would immediately start getting messages from. No complaint about that whatsoever. I was more than happy to help or give my thoughts on whatever.
I think I even asked you at one point when we ended up finally getting it like a year later, like, hey, man.
Yeah, what do I do?
Yeah, yeah. And you're always so gracious with that. Like, okay, no problem. Here's the steps.
Well, I just feel like I have to be because, and no dig at what they told me at Med Express. Just you have to realize nobody knew. They didn't know. They were just telling you, what do you do when you get the flu? You go sleep that crap off, you go sleep it off. You do whatever. And they didn't know. And so I mean, I'm telling you that when people tell me they have it, or people that have had it or whatever, I tell them the first thing, the pursed lip breathing. I'll give them the list of the things that Dr. Daniel Wells owns, Wells Family Pharmacy at Grants in Blue Well. His family owns Blue Wells Pharmacy. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
The great people. But I give them that list immediately. As a matter of fact, when I was in respiratory therapy, I gave them that list, and they would give it to anybody else they had that had it. Just as things to like try to build you up, you know. But there was one death that really stuck out in my mind, or sticks out in my mind all the time. And he was a police officer. His name was James. And I do not know why I'm blanking on his last name right now.
That's okay. We'll probably keep it censored anyway, just in case. But
James had just retired as a police officer, and he was given the exact same advice I was given. Like I said, just had retired, and that's him. Yeah, James Vance. And if you ever meet his wife and two kids, I mean, sweetest people. But he was given the exact same advice I was given, and he went home and he laid down and ended up, on a ventilator, and they ended up losing him.
I remember that.
And I'll tell you, another good friend of mine, Kelly lost like 3 or 4 of her family members at one time, like within like a 2-week span from it. Her dad, and some other family members. I know so many people that lost people from it.
Yep.
And it just, one, we didn't know anything about it. 2, nobody took it serious until they had to. 3, and this is, if you know me well enough to know how I feel about it. I think the worst thing that ever happened to it, or happened with it, was it somehow became a political thing. And my attitude towards it was always, and generally in life, is you've got to make the best decisions you can for you and your family. And that's not my place. You don't want to do something, if you think it's best for your family, who am I to tell you, but we just lost a lot of people to that thing. And it's a time in our life that none of us ever thought would happen. Nobody ever thought about that. And, I to really, just to, sort of drive the point home about it, it got to be such a thing that I couldn't escape talking about it. I couldn't escape it. People would talk to me about it everywhere I went. And of course, I mean, like I said, I was the point that a lot of people knew and that had it, and people were scared and they wanted to know from somebody that had been through it. and I couldn't escape it. And I'll be honest when I say that there's a reason I don't talk about this a lot, and you know it. But I started realizing sometimes afterwards, while I was in respiratory therapy. By the way, just so I don't leave them out, because they were wonderful. My respiratory therapists were Veronica, Thessa, and Jan at Princeton Hospital. Jan's retired now. They were all fantastic. All. I mean, just again, I have no complaints. Beautiful people. But I started noticing a few months out. Again, like I said, you got to realize people are messaging me about it and texting me about it. And this is not to throw anything bad at, that's not me complaining about it. But people are talking to me about it all the time. And if I do see people out there talking to me about it, if it's on the news, it's on your Facebook feed, it's on everything. And I start realizing that, here I am driving down the road on my way to respiratory therapy, and I've been sitting at a light for 30 seconds too long, or I'm in a store and I realize I've been standing in the same spot for a few minutes. The night it really hit me when I decided to get to talk about it, because it ends up starting to cause me like to have like panic attacks and stuff. And so I start talking to a doctor about it. And one night, my wife was sitting in the living room, and here I am in the kitchen. And I just want to stress that I don't mean to put this all like poor me, all about me, because it was every bit as much about my family. But I mean, this thing put my wife through just pure hell. I mean, worrying about my kids and whatever. I mean, I remember one day after I got out, I'd went out in the yard, and my cat came up, and I sat down in the yard, and I like curl up around him. I'm sitting there petting him. It's cold outside, and my wife comes out, sees me, and like falls down the steps trying to run to me because she thinks like I've had a heart attack or something, and I've just collapsed in the yard.
Sure.
But this one night, she's sitting in the living room and watching whatever on TV, and I'm at the fridge, and I just remember her hollering and asking me, what's going on? Why are you just standing there with the fridge open? And I just been standing there, and I realized that what it was there was something. It might have been news wise, or it might have been, I don't know what it was, but there was something talking about it. And it just started getting worse and worse to where it was like I would blank out. I would just freeze up about it. And went and talked to a doctor about it. And they end up diagnosing me with PTSD for it.
Yeah.
And which is a strange thing to talk about. I really try not to talk about it very much. In my terms, I'm not talking about other people at all, but just, you're used to hearing about like PTSD with like soldiers, or like, people that have had like insanely, like violent experiences or something like that. You don't expect it to come from a sickness, but it's a thing. And, I've talked to them about it, I mean, I talk about it all the time with them, but it's something I'll have. It's something COVID specifically is something I try to sort of stay away from talking about, because for one, with that, but also I never know what I'm going to get. And I don't want, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to change anybody's mind or affect anybody's life or tell anybody what to do about it. And I've tried to always make that clear. I all the vaccines and whatever, I've had them. The last one I got though, when I got it, every time I get the vaccine though, it'll, and I'm not blaming it on the vaccine. I'm specifically talking about me. There's something, I mean, even my doctor said that there's something about this virus that your body does not like. And he even recommended that I not get anymore.
Sure.
Because every time I do, I start getting chest pains. I mean, I'll be sitting there and my Apple Watch will be like, your heart rate's over 150 and you don't appear to be moving. What's going on? So they told me to just lay off of them.
Yeah, I think the hurtful part of it is when people decide to talk about it, they take it to the extreme and forget to be empathetic about it. Of like, well, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. But I tend, not to pat myself on the back, I tend to have a lot more empathy for that way of thinking, because it was so many different things for so many different people. There were people like me, or like, those people we lost that you're talking about, and other people that were hurt by it, this was something that changed their life forever. And then there were people who it was just a cold.
Who didn't really have that personal,
right? They didn't have to go through that. And you have to realize too, I mean, even with as many people as we lost, what were the numbers in the end? What did it end up being, like 900 million people or something like that? Or not 900 million, Lord have mercy, 900,000 people.
Now across, I think the count definitely passed. Well, I have to look this up. I don't want to just shout out numbers, but then even that becomes like a political issue because they say, oh, well, it was tied to numbers. So the hospital would receive federal funding for, so if you got, whatever happened, you was bit by a dog and ended up dying of rabies, they would say, oh, well, he had COVID at the same time. Stuff like that is when it starts to twist.
Right.
And we forget, like, wait a minute. No, I personally know young people with families who passed away in Southern West Virginia who would not have if they didn't get COVID. Like, we know this was a killer.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to twist it into, but it doesn't become that. It's either black or white. There's no gray. There's no like, well, no, vaccines work for some bodies and maybe some bodies they don't, or they respond differently. You know what I mean? So that's when it starts getting crazy. I'm gonna look up real quick while you're talking.
No, I mean, I haven't had any arguments. Like I said, I'm a very sort of live and let live, man. You do you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm talking about like really I say the fake world, but just the media world of things you hear.
Right. Oh yeah. It went insane. I mean, I do remember being out places and hearing people get into like little skirmishes about like, I'm not wearing a mask or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not in this. I was wearing a mask for forever. My wife made a ton of masks and, to give to people or whatever, and, or made them for people, whatever. I'm not arguing with you about this. I'm going to do me. You don't want to wear a mask. I don't care what you do. Just don't. I did at that point. I did get to a point where I was like, please do not talk to me about this. I think back then I even had made like a Facebook post that was just like, hey, please don't talk to me about this anymore. Like, respectfully, I love y'all. I hope you're okay. If you need advice, this is what you should do. But I just need a break from this.
Sure.
I just, and the only funny part about it in the whole thing was that nobody had ever been through this before, right? Like, I remember people saying, we've never been quarantined before. And so the funny part about that is that here I am, like, I don't know how old you are when you're in fifth grade. What are you, like 11, 12?
Fifth grade would be 11.
10, 11,
11-ish, somewhere in there.
So here I am. I'm 11 years old, whatever, in fifth grade. And we're just starting school. We've only been in school for like a month. And one morning we wake up to go to school, and my mom says, "You're not going to school today. We have to go over to the health department." So we go over to the health department, come to find out that my little brother and sister had gotten this virus, I guess it's called. I can't remember if it's called Shigella or Shigellosis or something like that. It sounds like I'm making it up, but that's what it's called. But it's some kind of like bacteria that comes from like, well, it's like some kind of like fecal matter gets in you or whatever.
Right.
So anyway, and it probably comes from like not washing your hands. Not to mention, like, if I'm 11 at that time, they're 4, and we all know how like gross little kids are.
Right.
That's how it is.
Walking.
Yeah, I mean, we
Petri
went
dishes.
to a daycare at the time. My mom worked at a daycare, so it was definitely picked up from there. But anyway, so we end up having to be quarantined for it. So my brother and I are out of, the little ones were too young to even be in school. But my brother and I wind up being quarantined for this thing with my little brother and sister. And I remember going through this whole thing where we had to take all the toys in the house. My mom set up these like giant trash cans outside full of bleach water. And she actually took the screen door off of our house and laid it out. So we could, after we bleached our toys, and you're talking every toy, even if it was electronic. So if it was electronic, after that, it didn't work anymore. And you had to lay it out on that screen so it could dry in the sun, and then we could play with our toys again. But one day mom comes to me and she said, or me and Kevin, and she says, y'all have to go live with your grandparents. And, we're really upset about it. Even though like we loved our grandparents, but that's just a big thing. And it was so we wouldn't end up, we had finally tested clear for it, which is a weird test anyway. Like you got to poop in like a plastic white cowboy hat, and then your mom's got to like swab it, and then they've got to run it to the health department. They've got to test it. And then, so anyway, we finally tested clear. So they send us to our grandparents to go live with them. And there you go. Shigellosis. And so we end up living with my grandparents for, I don't even know how long it was, but I had to miss most of my 5th grade year. So anyway, to tie all that in, when they told us we were going to have to quarantine for COVID, or people were having to quarantine, I thought, because I never had talked to anybody about this, I just thought, well, yeah, people have to do that sometimes. That's what happens. I had no idea the rest of the country didn't go through this thing that I went through. So here I am acting like being quarantined is not a big deal, and wondering like why everybody's getting so mad about it. And it was just because we had this like novel experience that most people have not had at all.
Sure.
But, ended up being okay. And actually in my book of memories, living with my grandparents for that time winds up being like some of the best times of my life.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that like we learned a lot, because obviously, for instance, restaurants, I genuinely think it had started out as, we got to beat this. And everyone band together, and it was like, okay, let's do this thing. And then eventually people started thinking, well, I'm going to start making more out of this and trying to figure out what's the ulterior motives here. And then restaurants ended up losing their business. Like, I don't know how many percentage of restaurants ended up closing. And then you see, officials going out when they're not supposed to. And that becomes a whole thing, and it becomes this huge knot.
Well, that, but also
mess.
Some of the things, I mean, they were ridiculous. Like, I remember even, I think SNL even made fun of it at one time. That was like, we have to mask up to order our food, but then when they bring our food, we can eat our food without our mask.
Right. And
then it's like, well, what happened? The food's at the table, like COVID's standing back, like, I can't do nothing, can't do anything.
Right.
And then, getting ready to get you, and you put your mask back on. It's like, oh, he's about to eat that last French fry. Oh, he masked up.
Sure.
Oh,
and try to tell 400 million people to do anything.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
At the same time, you know what I mean?
It didn't. I mean, in some ways, I would, I would get angry, but it was mostly just about like,
it becomes hurtful.
Yeah, well, like I said no, but there was one time when a man stopped me outside a grocery store, and he said, "Why are you wearing a mask? It's not real." And I was just like, "Okay, man, okay." But I have to realize, like, this man doesn't know what I went through, and there were people that had it that are okay today that wound up having even worse experiences than I did. One guy I worked with, I won't say his name. He was in the hospital with it. I mean, in the actual hospital for 2 months straight with it. Never wound up being put on a ventilator.
I have another friend that ended up, I'm pretty sure he ended up being ventilated. He's young like us. Yeah. He was in there for, I guarantee over a month.
Yeah. And I'm like, and so my mind winds up being like, well, this thing that I boil it down to a week. This thing that was like a week, and I've seen some of the doctors out and the nurses, whatever, and they're like, yeah, you're lucky. This thing almost took you out. And I'm thinking, like, this thing that was a week of my life almost ended it and took me out of work for a year and a half.
Oh, the residual effects is...
I mean, you're talking about like the fact that I still cannot sleep through the night ever since this has happened. I mean, I'm up every hour and a half, 2 hours. Like, I'm up all night. I still have dreams about this thing. I still shy away from the conversation a lot of the time about it. At work, I tend to keep even more to myself than I used to. But it's just like this thing, and I'm in all these groups. I had to leave a lot of them because it was just, like I said, I can only see so much of it before
Sure.
I'm like, okay, I need a break from this. But you see these people that are still being affected. Their breathing still affected today, or they develop things like POTS syndrome or whatever. And
what's long COVID where you have the like, is it like glass in your lungs?
Oh yeah. I mean, I still have to go every year to a pulmonologist just to get a workup. And they always tell me that I forget the exact phrasing of it, but it's glass-like structures in my lungs, and it's just scarring or whatever, but it's in the very bottom lobes of my lungs, and it'll always be there. I even had a doctor in Charleston tell me one day when he was like, yep, you're doing better, because I'm just telling you, one day it's going to be your lungs that get you. I was like, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Doc.
Thanks for giving a little bit more anxiety to carry around about it. But
is that part of what started your gym journey when you started?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because dude, when you're off all that time, not to mention you can't breathe. So what exercise you're doing in respiratory therapy is minimal. You're laying around, you're sleeping all the time, you're eating like what you don't have anything going on. And man, I'd gained so much weight. So I was like, I got to do something. And, work got crazy for a bit. So it's been on hold for a bit. So I got to get back at it. But all this holiday food don't help worth a damn. But
you got to enjoy life too.
Yeah. But yeah, that was part of it. I mean, dude, afterwards I wind up like 0.1 away from diabetes and end up, having to lose a bunch to get that off of me. And I, like I said, I mean, I just couldn't breathe. And still this day, I notice that I have, like when I'm singing, I have a harder time holding notes or I still do get winded some, a lot more than I used to. Now, granted, I'm older, but still, just things take it out of me. And ever since this happened, I get dehydrated super fast. And anything like that will affect my heart rate or my, or even my blood pressure. I can't eat a whole lot of salt. If I do, I'm going to start having heart palpitations. If I get dehydrated, I'm going to start having heart palpitations. Too much caffeine now, heart palpitations, too much, anything. It's like now I feel like one of those little dogs, little old ladies carry around. I'm like, I've got all these conditions that I've got to stick to in order, I keep this giant jug of water that everybody makes fun of me for, but
sure.
Just, I don't like heart palpitations, or it's not a good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I'm sure too, and I know, you can talk about this to what level you want, but I'm sure you're a real likable guy. Like everybody, I remember when this happened, it was like the world kind of stopped there for 2 days and everyone was waiting to hear updates from Courtney of like, like, oh no. Like it was like, I think it became real for everyone who knew you and knew like the type of person you were and are. And, I think that stress alone on your family, because obviously they love you more than anyone. I mean, we love you too, but that's a residual effect too. I wouldn't doubt Courtney has PTSD from it.
Courtney, I mean, we just don't talk about it. The kids, we had them in therapy for a little bit, about it because they couldn't be away from me. Anytime I would have to leave, even just going to the doctor, I'll be back in a half hour, an hour, or whatever. They would lose it. Going to school, they would cry, can't be away from me. To this day, and don't get me wrong, they're fine now. But to this day, they'll still, like it when I get called out at night or whatever, they still cry. They'll still call me and check on me constantly. It was just this thing that happened to them very early where they felt like I almost lost my dad. And they check on, like I said, they check on me all the time.
Yep.
John especially. John hates that I take overtime calls. And he'll FaceTime me or whatever. He just wants to talk. He just wants to know that I'm okay and I'm whatever. And sometimes he'll even, if it's on the weekends, he'll even wait up till I get home. And he don't want to talk once I get home. He just wants to see me walk in that door or hear the door open and close and lock and know I'm home so he can go to bed. But it was just a few years of like a lot of stress on our family.
Yeah. And the kids too, like there's never been a time where, I mean, they were remote for forever.
Yeah.
So you got that, a lot of them growing up on a time where socialization is so important to their growth. But also when they did go back to school, they didn't see each other's face for like 9 months or something like that. So the development of that with them growing up with this thing, we don't know what that experience was like.
Right. And I don't think we've realized really. I think teachers see it. And I've talked to a lot of teachers about it. The ramifications of what, and I'm not anybody to say what we should have done different.
Sure. I mean, nobody.
I'm not that person. But the way, like, we haven't quite realized how that moment in time will affect our kids in the long run. I mean, in some ways, I just wonder if kids think, of school as being like kind of like, well, at any time we can just go back to being schooled at home, I mean, I always feel bad, not just, I mean, I'm not putting this on par with people dying, but like, think all like the seniors that was their senior year and it just absolutely ruined it. you know, I mean, it affected so much. So many businesses closed and didn't open back up.
And people who did bury loved ones, they couldn't attend the funeral.
Right.
They couldn't see the body.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I mean, it's a strange time. And, I know that's, you know, this story wasn't, you know, in the realm of, you know, spooky or,
oh man,
or creepy or whatever, but
I mean, there's a couple days there where you were like not sure if you were going to be here next week.
Right.
So that's definitely.
Well, I can tell you that the one thing that sticks with me from it is that, and I told you this, even about that old man dream, that there are times when I'm all alone and I'm sitting in the woods or whatever, waiting to do my work. There are times where I wonder about that woman, and I wonder about me as that old man, or I wonder about that dog. There are times like, and I'm not talking just about remembering the dream. There are just times where I think about like, I wonder what me there is doing. I wonder if that's my real life. And I know that sounds crazy. That makes me sound like a lunatic or whatever. But
no, I mean, well, dreams feel so real sometimes. You're in the moment. And like you said, time slows down and it feels like you're there.
Yeah.
So it's a valid thought.
But I just, yeah, man, it in some ways, I mean, I had a lot going on at that time, you know, in those couple of years, but in some ways it is kind of like a marked point of like everything before and everything after.
Pre and post.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's just, I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about it other than, it changed. It just changed my whole life.
Yeah.
And anything that happens to anybody like that, you don't have a say in it. You don't, you know, it's something that happened to you, and you just gotta keep on keeping on. You know?
Sure.
You just gotta keep going. And,
where are you at today with it?
As far as
like, you know, a lot of people would think, oh, well, after you get out of it, I'm so grateful for every day. But, you know, you still struggle every day to kind of, you know, you're definitely glad to be here.
For the most part, it's something. Now I realize this is like this is not something that a lot of people have because they lost people to it or whatever. But for the most part, I would say I try to keep it out of my head. You know, I'd say about 95% of the time, I try to not think about it. But where I don't sleep, you know, there are those times where, you know, like you're laying awake looking at the moon and there it is. And it's just you and that. And, you got to do whatever you can.
Yep.
I'm not there now. That's over. It's okay. You're okay. And I try to think, I try to think of that woman in some way. I try to think of that dog, and I try to think, even I find myself with my own dogs doing that sometimes, you know, just like you're here, you know. And, I mean, you know, everybody, one day you're not going to be okay. But right now I'm okay. And, you know, I was watching, the Muppet Christmas Carol with John the other night, you know. Actually, today while I was Christmas shopping, I was thinking about that and how it's just a good reminder. Now I'm relating that to me, not like I don't think that I've been some evil bastard, you know.
Oh, you know, you're the best.
But I try to think like, in some way I try to relate that dream or whatever it was to that. And it's like, it's showing you that like good things can happen and miracles and whatever can happen. To kind of close out the COVID talk, years ago, my wife and I went shopping at Concord Mills for Christmas down in Charlotte. And so we go into, what is that big hunting stores? Like Cabela's?
And there's another one, but that's the one.
Yeah, so Bass Pro. That's what it was. So we go in Bass Pro, and we're walking around looking, and I still had like a Velcro wallet. Okay. So we're looking around, and I remember like I needed to get my cell phone out of my pocket for something. And we get to the next store, and I go to pay for something, and I can't find my wallet. So here I am in this huge mall. I mean, Charlotte is huge. Now, granted, not as big as like Atlanta or like Los Angeles or whatever, but still pretty big and pretty damn busy.
Sure.
And it's Christmas time, so it's like extra full. So we go walking around this mall, and I'm trying to find my wallet. And I just remember going in this, I start tracing my steps going back to all these stores we've been in. And I go in this one, and I asked the woman at the cashier, I asked her, have you seen a wallet? Has anybody turned in a wallet? And she says, no. And I say, I just made the comment, I know, and especially in a place like Charlotte, it's gone.
Oh no.
Somebody's taken it. Somebody's stolen it.
Sure.
And this beautiful old woman, with glasses and black gray hair. She couldn't have been, like I said, 4 or 5 foot tall. She puts her hand on my hand, and she goes, baby, don't think that way. She said, good things happen. There are good people in the world. Miracles happen. And I said, I'm sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have been like that. And so I turned and walked out of the store. And I thought, where have I not been? And I go back to Bass Pro, and right there on the table, the first table I'd come to, was just sitting right there behind a pair of pants. Nobody'd messed with it. Had all the money in it that had in it. And I try to think of that woman too. There have been times where I wonder if that woman was that woman.
Yeah.
Or I think things like, Mama talking about angels, and stuff like that. Like, if a stranger comes to your door, always be nice to them, because sometimes angels,
Mm-hmm.
And I think, well, what if Mama was that woman? Or, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it.
I think they all are.
Yeah.
In a way.
Whatever you think, it's some kind of like loving energy, whatever. And you got to hold on to it. And that's how you move on. Because no matter what, if you boil it down, yeah, something bad's going to happen one day. Something's going to happen to all of us. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that's actually probably the biggest lesson I took from that was there was nothing I did, nothing I could have done really. It's just now at this point, I just have to look at it as this is something that happened to me. And right now I've got today, and I'm okay. And hopefully I wake up tomorrow and it's just as good and I'm just as lucky. And maybe, one day it won't be like that. But right now it is. And right now, you've only got right now.
That's it. Well, I appreciate you breaking this down for me. I've always, wanted to kind of ask, but I know it's a touchy subject and something that's traumatic for you, and I just appreciate you doing
You're
this.
welcome, man.
Yep. And we're going to have you on again because you have so many stories to tell. But I appreciate everyone taking the time to listen to this. I hope you're all healthy and enjoying the holiday season. And, let's just try to have a little more empathy in our lives and be happy and nice and good to each other. And, everything will work out. So thank you, John. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Please subscribe to Creepalachia. And don't forget, we have a TikTok. And we have the audio version on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Merry Christmas.